Class 2 Chapter 5. Tourist Behavior, the Marketing Practitioner's Approach. Planners responsible for marketing tourism rarely think scientifically about the nature of tourist behavior. With some exceptions, most tourism managers have neither the time nor inclination to stand back from the context of their daily responsibilities to formulate hypotheses and build models of what tourist behavior, as a general theoretical field, might be. They are mainly concerned with pragmatic solutions to immediate problems. They adopt rule-of-thumb research procedures designed to identify and answer questions which they see as relevant to selling their products better. No explicit, systematic view of behavior is involved. The practitioner approach to tourist behavior typically involves the acquisition of data useful for four kinds of analysis: economic and societal analysis of the business environment, quantitative volumetric analysis of consumption, quantitative segmental analysis of consumption, and quantitative and qualitative explanatory analysis of consumption patterns. Economic and societal macro data. Tourism managers assume that demand for tourism, as a commodity which is both price and income elastic, is greatly influenced by prevailing economic trends. They commonly seek to monitor and predict demand by acquiring three main kinds of macro data on disposable earnings. Since tourism is a leisure good, demand will be dependent on what the consumer has left once essential goods, such as accommodation, food and drink, have been paid for. Relative prices. According to some commentators, these feed through after a year. Relative prices are particularly important in destination choices. They can be affected by changes in exchange rates, the price of competitive products, inflation, the fluctuating price of air travel and other external variables. For example, Spain has enjoyed great success as a mass tourism destination over the last 3 decades because of the weakness of the peseta, old currency, against other currencies, in addition to the positive attractions it offers in climate, culture, etc., consumer preferences. Obviously, tourism choices are dependent on what people like doing with their leisure time. Tastes and wants of consumer populations change under the influence of many factors: the media, economic constraints or opportunities, education, etc. In the 1990s we saw, for instance, greater preoccupation in the West with healthy lifestyles, the environment and taking shorter holidays, all of which have impacted upon tourism demand. It is the effect of these influences which make many large tourism organizations regularly monitor the socio-economic environment through compiling tourism barometers - short studies which look at a range of economic and social indicators in order to assess the outlook for tourism. Volumetric aggregate data. Since tourism management is ultimately about sales and revenue, bookings made, admissions achieved, packages sold, bed space occupied, etc., practitioners are interested in quantitative measures of overall tourist behavior. The tourism manager seeks to quantify tourist demand in order that it can be satisfied in the present or future through a supply of tourism products in a manner which produces a profit for the commercial operator, and consumer satisfaction for the public sector or non-profit-oriented tourism organization. This means that tourism organizations are, in the last analysis, most interested in volumetric, macro data on tourist behavior which provide reliable indications of current performance, which can then be used as a basis for planning and managing likely future demand for tourism goods. Most tourism agencies, for example, national and regional tourist boards, focus their main research analyses on 3 kinds of question: how many visitors/customers do we have? How many units of product have been purchased? Bed nights, air tickets, admissions, packages, etc.? How much was spent? These questions are addressed through analysis of data indicating total volumes of travelers/trips/visits/bookings/bed nights, and total volumes of revenue derived from them. Disaggregated data and market segmentation. However, though such aggregate data represent the bottom line of tourism performance, it is insufficient to provide a satisfactory managerial understanding of tourist markets. For one thing, aggregate figures always conceal important differences in demand by market groups within the total. Secondly, aggregate data do not reveal much about the kind of tourists who constitute the overall levels of demand or the nature of the tourism experience they engaged in. For these reasons, tourism organizations commonly institute research procedures, typically through commissioning or undertaking visitor surveys, which explore both the nature of the trip and the kinds of tourists who engaged in them. This process is called market segmentation, which has been defined as the process of breaking aggregate demand into identified subgroups within overall populations. The identification and profiling of the market segments which may be particularly worthwhile as consumers for particular tourism products is a critical requirement in marketing planning, since in most markets a relatively small number of people may constitute the main demand for a product. It is by market segmentation that a tourism organization defines its market, matches products to it, and promotes in media which will most effectively reach the target consumer groups. Market segmentation data come in two forms and each commonly includes some or all of the categories of data listed. Trip descriptors, purpose of trip, party size and composition, transport used, driving distance, activities engaged in on trip. Tourist descriptors, place of origin, international/domestic/regional/local, first time or repeat visit, age and family status, gender, sources of information used, expenditure per trip and per day, accommodation used, social grading/occupation, education, lifestyle and satisfaction levels. 5 kinds of segmentation data which are particularly important in tourist behavior analysis deserve further comment. Purpose of trip data and the emergence of VFR research. Virtually all tourism organizations try to distinguish what proportion of their business comes from 4 main categories of travel: recreational, business, visiting friends and relatives, VFR, and others. It is essential to understand these categories because they are associated with differences in levels of daily expenditure. Business travelers spend the most per day, length of trip, international recreational travelers and VFRs stay longest. Accommodation choices. Business travelers stay in the most expensive hotels, while only a small number of VFRs use commercial accommodation. Party size. Business travelers often travel alone, while most recreational tourists travel in the company of others. Moreover, the proportions of each type of tourism category can vary widely. For example, many hotels get their main revenues from business travelers during the week but from recreational travelers at the weekend. Place of origin and geodemographics. Tourism planners are always interested in the geographic origins of their visitors. In international tourism, assessing the generating countries from which tourists arrive allows National Tourist Organization to select their main target markets. The USA, Japan, UK, France, China and Germany are some of the biggest generating countries of international tourism. In domestic and regional tourism, driving distance can be a major factor in the market for attractions. Recently, a major advance in geographic analysis was made by the development of technique called geodemographic, which combines geography with socio-demographics. The basic idea behind it is that people who live in similar neighborhoods are likely to share similar behavioral, consumption and lifestyle patterns. Neighborhood profiles are compiled through the use of census data, postcode as electoral registers, credit-related data, and customer databases held by consumer profiling by geographical area, establishing how a product may sell in a certain area, identifying product usage across geographical areas, establishing who is buying a certain product, and defining the market potential of existing customer database/mailing lists, targeting potential customers from consumers of other products. The reason why people are increasingly receiving larger and more regular loads of junk mail and unsolicited phone calls from businesses is because someone somewhere has them down on a regional, geodemographic database as a prime target market. Family life cycle. The family life cycle concept has been around in sociology and marketing since the 1950s. The idea behind it is that consumption changes as people progress through different phases of the cycle and that tourism can sometimes be a ritual purchase to celebrate a rite of passage as people pass from one phase of the life cycle to another. for example, going away on honeymoon to celebrate marital